everybody? Good?
Fabulous.
Fabulous.
At the Reader's Digest version or full?
Yesterday was good, and it went well. I thank again administration and council for some very civilized and respectful debates. It was very, very helpful. So we'll try and get through. We'll try and stick to the same schedule, so by 5 o'clock I'm starting to look at when we can take a break. I'm not sure, Councillor Grant, I know, may come in later. And then, not sure, I know Councillor Hollingsworth is on his way. Did we hear about...
I've not heard from...
Okay, so we'll hope that they can come in.
Do you want to allow
For a few more minutes?
You want to allow for a few more minutes? Because I think that we've been making some pretty good time.
What's the prognosis? I think we're going to wrap up Saturday.
Well, it looks...
By Saturday? I don't mind staying an extra hour or two on Friday.
Okay. So we did really well yesterday in terms of the timing, and we have recreation left today. So then we have a couple of reports, the outstanding reports that we had talked about at our last council meeting. They're in your package. So there's 2 reports there. So we're heading to the outside agencies after that.
Yeah, if I may, Madam Mayor. So with capital, we're about halfway through, a little over halfway through for recreation.
A little over, yeah.
We have capital for paramedic services, and then also capital for the Glenstone Lodge.
Okay. So 3.
I think they are relatively straightforward, so I think that we should make a reasonable time moving through those. We also have, as the mayor said, there are a few outstanding items from our council meeting on Monday that we had referred to the Budget Steering Committee, which we would like to deal with following that. And then we have within our outside community groups, there are 2 components. There's the request for grants, but then there's also the request for our services. And I think that those also could be, maybe the request for services could be the next step following what we're working through, and that'll, those are items that we might even be able to get through after the break or within today. And so that would leave the grant component as well as any other items that council would like to bring forward to discuss as part of the process.
The police, they don't come here, do they?
No.
Because Danny was here, so I was just wondering.
Yes. Yes, so they present to the Police Services Board, and then that's it. I mean, the police have been to present to council before in the past, right, Madam CEO? It's not always...
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have sometimes in the past invited the police, the library, some of our community groups to come in and present, the Health Unit, the Conservation Authority. So through a report that's going to be coming forward to council for Monday evening on many of our committees and board appointments, part of the recommendations you're going to see in that report would be to maybe have those organizations come in once a year to make a presentation to council, not necessarily specific to budget, but more so about what their initiatives and their programs are within the community.
I understand the police do not even have, there's no obligation on police services to come to, because that happened in Ottawa where they asked the police chief to come and he said, my office hours are 8 to 5, come and see me.
Well, we don't have that relationship with our Cornwall Police Service, by the way.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think that if council wanted to have the police services come forward and do a brief overview of their budget, I think that they would be willing to. I do not know what their availability would be for tomorrow, but...
So we're making good time. Hopefully we won't meet Saturday morning, but so far so good. So we will get back on track with the capital projects from Recreation. Do we need to do roll call again? Yes. So let's do that.
Mayor Bernadette Clement, présente. Councillors Claude McIntosh, Elaine McDonald, present. Sid Gardner, here. Dean Hollingsworth, Carolyn Hebert, present. Councillors Todd Bennett, here. Justin Towndale, present. And Eric Bertrand, present.
You're on the same agenda, so we're good to go. You don't have to do an adoption of the agenda. Great. Mr. Boileau.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. I think we're going to go right into item C61. Before we do that, I did have a brief conversation with a couple of councillors yesterday about the Art Centre, which we talked about last. And I think what might be helpful to council at some point is that we have, of course, as a committee and as staff, a lot of visuals and a lot of new information that we've received, and I think it might be helpful for council to get a bit of that information, probably from staff, at some point in the very near future. I think pictures will tell 1,000 words of, of what we've seen and the models that we've seen. So I do want to explain to council that it would have been helpful for council to see that, but we hope to do that very shortly.
Thank you for bringing that back up, because we ended on that note, sort of saying that not everybody was at the same stage in terms of information, and you've had some very important visits as well, so we'd love to hear about that. So we'll look for that on an upcoming agenda. Thank you.
Okay.
So our next project is, as Mark said, on page C61. It's the Recreation Master Plan update. This is a strategic planning document which sets out the needs and priorities for our department for the next 10 years. The picture you see in front is the existing one that's set to expire at the end of 2019. This process would be very heavy on public engagement and consultation to sort of seek out what are the needs and desires of the community as far as recreation. We're seeing that the community is changing all the time, and so just recently, in the last couple of years, we've seen a few developments in recreation that really weren't on the radar, and so this document is really to try and sort of flush out those needs from the community and so that we can plan for them. Some of those projects are sort of the BMX track, I'm sure many have heard lots about. We've recently, in the last year or two, created a cricket pitch in one of our parks. There's a community group approached us with a need for a facility. As well, pickleball is a sport that seems to be exploding with seniors and very popular, and they're always looking for additional facilities to accommodate their numbers. Yeah, sorry. The cricket pitch, it's located at Snetzinger Park, in the Northwoods Glen subdivision off of Blessed Sacrament Drive, if anyone's interested. It was a former baseball diamond that had seen very little use in recent years, and so it was a very good way to repurpose that space for this group. They play, I believe, every Sunday regularly through the summer, and they are working with us to try and establish some programs in which kids can register and provide some instruction and introduction to the sport.
That's cool.
Our next project
Can I stop you, Mr. Fawthrop? This is something that Councillor Grant raised with me around the rowing club. He's not here, but he'd like to come back to that discussion. I don't know if that would happen within the context of the Recreation Master Plan or elsewhere. Mr. Boileau?
Yeah, if I could, in fact, I did speak with Ms. Adams about that subject. It will certainly find a place in the Recreation Master Plan, but it's also fairly prominent in the Waterfront Plan.
Okay.
And so the consultants have suggested that there is a location, and we're working with, of course, the consultants, but also the group that Glenn speaks about with Kevin Donnelly, to try to find a location, likely in Gano Park at this time, and then perhaps in the future in the canal when the land ownership may be different and that sort of thing. So it is certainly an item that is going to find its place in the Waterfront Plan, and I think will be addressed or reflected in the Recreation Master Plan.
Good. I just wanted to make sure we didn't forget the rowing club and that there was space. Okay. Thank you.
So our next project on page C62 has come to council, so you're likely aware already. It's a civic complex floors in the dressing rooms. We've issued a tender, and that's been awarded and approved by council to replace the dressing room floors and in the hallways of the civic complex. It's like a rubberized surface that's safe for people to walk on with skates. There's some photos there. As you can see, it's got a number of patches in it, and it's seen its day and will do for replacement. So that's been awarded, and I believe we expect to see the actual install proceed at the end of this hockey season. Our next project on page C63 is the Civic Complex Arena Spectator Seat Replacement. This is a multi-year project in which we're proposing to start putting some money away to take on that project. We propose to put $55,000 for 5 years to look at replacing, as you see in the photo, the blue seats. Anyone who's enjoyed taking in a game at the Civic Complex will know that the blue seats are in rough shape. Particularly, it's the base of the seats, the cushion that you sit on has deteriorated, so you tend to...
Is there a cushion there? I didn't think there was any cushion the last time I was there.
There was.
Back in 1974.
It's been compressed for 40 years.
Compressed, there you go.
And so we've been in contact with the company that originally supplied these seats. They are still in business, and in fact, they still produce this same make and model. So we've been talking to them, and you can purchase the replacement cushions, as well as the seat tray as a whole as well. So we are looking to essentially do that as opposed to replace the entire seat components.
Councillor McIntosh and then Councillor Gardner.
One of the criticisms I've heard of the seating in the complex, the seats aren't wide enough, and that goes back to 1976 when they downsized the whole thing. It was supposed to be 5,800 seats, and rather than borrow $1 million to finish it, the council of the day decided to compress it. There'd be no chance of, as you replace the seats like a row, make them a little, I don't know, what's the width of those?
Well, I don't think it's the seat width is the issue, because these are a standard seat that anyone can purchase for any kind of auditorium or sports arena. But my understanding, what I've heard, is it's the slope or the pitch.
Yeah.
Is that, so the leg room is what's been compromised in the design, which has made it rather tight. And you're very correct, that would be a very costly endeavor to try and flatten out that slope to improve the leg room.
We did, when we were looking at this cushion problem and so on, it was raised to us as well from one of the supervisors in the building that he feels also that they're very low. And if you're sitting in it next time, think about it. They do feel low. I mean, there is, of course, the compression problem we have with the cushion, which makes it even lower. But if they were a bit higher, I think it might be a little bit more comfortable than what it is. You're pretty close to the floor when you're sitting down, so.
Maybe we just need cushions, not seats.
Whole new arena.
Councillor Gardner.
I guess what I'd like to see done when you start this is probably along the bottom rows first, because those are the ones that are used the most, as in also theater. They're the ones that wore out the first. Reason being, if we can do the lower level when the curling comes in, or some of the lower level, there'll be comfortable seats and there'll be new seats until actually when the big games, the finals start, then you'll have to go up. But I'd really like to see that bottom edge done first and then move up, because the top seats are usually not as used as much, so they're not as damaged. So I'd like to see that done when you start doing it.
And on that note, you know, Jamie pointed out that we could look at just the cushion, or we could look at the cushion and the pan. Some of the pans are very damaged from the days when we didn't have mesh.
Yeah.
So the pucks, so everywhere behind the net at both ends, well, mostly at the one end, I guess, maybe, the one we were looking at the one end. but the pans are all damaged. So, this is, this is gonna be a conversation with this company, because the one thing that concerns me a little bit with this proposal is that the seats are currently available, but what would happen in 5 years or in 3 years if they're no longer available? So we're gonna have to get into a conversation of, whether we buy for the next couple of years, or how does this work?
The other thing is that I have gone to quite a few Colts games, and those seats with the cushions, whatever's underneath has dried out, so you've got one cheek on sponge and the other one on hard surface, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Councillor Towndale and then Councillor Elaine McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen. Actually, that's an interesting point you bring up, because, I mean, if this company doesn't manufacture these seats, but I mean, with all the seats we have here, 4,000, you'd think they'd, honor the end to that, because that's quite a substantial order for parts. Question on that, are you looking to replace the bottoms with a hard plastic, or are you trying to do a cushion again?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it would be a cushion. This make and model, that's the type of seat that comes with it. From our understanding and talking to some of the staff that have been there for quite a while, and we kind of alluded to it a little bit yesterday when we spoke about the Benson Center with the humidity problem, was that in the early days of the Civic Complex, before they had dehumidification in the facility, that was a big problem, particularly with these cushion seats. They would absorb a lot of that humidity and remain wet, so we think that that's played a factor in the deterioration of them as well.
I find some mold in there. Through you, Madam Mayor, as a follow-up, I've heard the same concerns that you mentioned, Councilor McIntosh mentioned. It's the pitch, and it's definitely the leg room, because you get in there and it's just not comfortable, and that is an issue. I mean, in fact, in this photo, you can clearly see people who are hanging their legs down over the next row, and that's not uncommon when you go. I do think it's important to do some work on these seats, obviously, for various reasons, but is this a Band-Aid solution for a much larger problem? Because we're looking to spend $275,000 over the course of this project, 55 over 5 years. But I mean, at the same time, should we be looking at what the options are? I mean, anything to replace these seats in terms of fixing the legroom and the pitch is going to be a massive undertaking. There's no question. You'd probably do small sections at a time, and that would be like a multi-year project. But should we not be looking at that as well? Because I mean, while the building is old, I really don't see it going anywhere, considering the size of it and what it would take to build another arena to replace that, et cetera, so for location, right? So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that, looking at a bigger solution down the road? Obviously, cost is an issue, but...
One of the things we talked about is if, for example, we got a row of these new seats and see whether the elevation, for example, does make a difference, because the cushion will make a little bit of a difference. The other thing is that it would be a lot of work, but you could actually raise all of the elevations of the seats. And so that's something that we could look at. I think if we got say a row of these new seats, cushions, and see how that feels versus what we currently have. If that's not sufficient, does it make sense to just test raising these? Because when he pointed it out, when you sit in it, you really understand what we're talking about. I think the pitch is another issue too, but you know what? The Civic Complex is in pretty good shape.
Yes, yeah.
And I think, as we keep these items coming forward, it's going to keep getting a little bit better. So I think, if we just have a chance to do what we're talking about, I think it'll make it better.
Thank you for that, and through you, Madam Mayor, I agree. I think the arena is in really good shape considering its age, and these some of these are major improvements, I shouldn't say minor, but they just improve it and definitely add to the longevity of it and the appeal of it, so.
Councillor Lane and then Councillor Hollingsworth. Just want to reinforce what you said, underline it. Elevation is a great help to lack of legroom. It actually compensates. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through what's to stop us from, I think most people would admit that the seats in that building are perhaps, maybe even arguably past their due date. And I realize it's the idea of putting some money in and piling up enough cash to go move on with this, and it may end up going through Ms. Bailey, but what's to stop us from using money out of a reserve this year to act on it this year while this guy is still in business this year, and then simply pay ourselves off or pay ourselves back over the next 4, 5 years, you had said? So why couldn't we potentially do that? Because I think the building represents our marquee building as far as any larger venue, watchtower conferences and stuff like that. And I don't know if I want to wait 5 or 6 years to deal with it when I think it's possibly gone now. Like, could we do that?
Ms. Bailey?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we could do that. Currently, there's not enough money in that particular reserve to fund that, so it would put that reserve into a negative balance. We could pay it off over the next 5 years, but it means, in essence, that we're sort of borrowing from other reserves to compensate for that. We have had, like our land reserve as an example, is in a negative balance. It isn't unheard of.
I'm just going to, in a subsequent question, Your Worship, then is it not, like, have we ever borrowed from another reserve to do something we needed to do and then said, okay, we'll straighten our books out?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have.
So it's not unheard of. Would you be...
Well, what I would suggest is, I would look for direction from Ms. Bailey, but, I mean, we've proposed 5 years, but if council wishes to do this quicker, perhaps we could do it. We don't have enough in the reserve for all of this project, but maybe we could do it in 2 or 3 years. I don't know.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there's $203,000 in the reserve, so maybe half the project, and if that's the direction council would like to go in.
So technically speaking, half, and you're going to put, is that half assuming this money is approved, Ms. Bailey, or is that half and this would be?
Just let me take a look. I believe that 55,000 is already out, but I want to take a look and see.
I guess, Your Worship, I'll probably talk to Mr. Brower on the side and see what he thinks and kind of flesh it out a little bit, but I think anybody that's been in that building recently would admit that the chairs are coming to the end of the road. And 5 years sometimes turns into 6 years, turns into 7 years. 7 years down the road, we talked about maintenance and stuff like that throughout other buildings. You want to stay ahead of it. And I realize this doesn't, the building's not going to collapse or anything like that, but the seats are kind of what the building's all about.
So, Councillor Hollingsworth, I think it's a question of priority. So I guess my subsequent question to you is, I know that these capital projects are in the book in order of priority, right? So what is the priority for this, according to your department? Is there...
Essentially, yes, the seats are certainly past due, and I think it falls not at the front of the list simply because, yes, the building can still be used for hockey games, and it's as Councillor Gardner says, it's a comfort issue. As well, the red seats around the perimeter, there's about 1,000 of those, and most of the regular hockey events that happen in the arena draw 1,000 or less into. So there is suitable seating, should people want to get closer to the action and sit in the red seats. But without question, I mean, these seats are past due to be replaced, and sooner or later. And I think there is a bit of economy of scale too by doing a larger volume as well.
Ms. Bailey would like one last chance to respond. Whenever I see her hand calculating, I know she wants to say something.
She's thinking, wait a minute.
She's calculating. Ms. Bailey?
Stop him before he says anything else.
I would like to take a look at it just maybe through the next couple of minutes to see what we have coming from that reserve planned for 2020, 21, 22. There is about $240,000 in that reserve with this 55 already removed. So I'll just take a quick look and see while you continue with your discussions.
No rush, we've got another day or two at this, I'm sure.
Okay.
Stop that.
Not quite day or two, Councillor Dean. Don't get ahead of yourself.
It's like you're at the finish line, but you're never...
Mr. Fothers?
Our next project on page C64 is King George Park Washroom. It's another multi-year project where the first half was approved in 2018 to move a portable to the King George Park to serve as a public washroom. Since the demolition of some former barracks that were on site that were used as for storage and as a public washroom. Ever since then, our department's been using porta potties for the baseball season to have washrooms there, so there's an ongoing cost. And through the purchase of the property at the corner of 9th and McConnell, the former school that was demolished, we acquired this portable, and so the money last year was approved to have it relocated. This budget here is essentially to renovate it into a public washroom. Our next project is on page C65. It's the bike path retaining wall structure replacement. So this is there are 4 large long sections of this retaining wall that support a bike path along Montreal Road. It starts right around Glenstorden Lodge and stops and starts, but extends pretty much to Boundary Road. This is a precast concrete structure, so it's essentially made of concrete blocks that get stacked on top of one another. And what's happened is some photos here that show some of the worst sections of this wall, but it's deteriorated due to exposure to road salts. And particularly this product we've seen in other installations as well, seems to over the years have performed rather poorly when exposed to road salts. And so this is a $1 million price tag. It's rather extensive. And in order to replace it, the bike path would have to be excavated. The railing as well along the top would have to be removed and replaced. So it's a rather expensive project. But as you can see with the condition, if it continues to deteriorate, the bike path located above it will erode, and we will likely have to have closures and make some temporary improvements in order to make sure that that bike path remains structurally stable.
Councillor Tandon?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, out of curiosity, how old was this structure? Because the brick, like the type of brick used that you mentioned, the concrete, doesn't look that old, realistically.
No, that's right, and we have done some work to it in the past, replacing sort of the capstones. I think the lower photo, you can see the blocks underneath have disintegrated. It essentially turns to sand, and yet the capstones have kind of remained in place. So the capstones are exposed to the most salt and would have eroded and been replaced in recent years. But I'm guessing it's in the 25 to 30 year range. We would propose, this budget's priced out based on a concrete product that it's much more robust. It was used more recently at the corner of Marlow and McConnell, where the Marlow reconstruction project, just on the north side of the hospital. We also have some in behind the Benson Center, between the Benson Center and the transit garage. There's a wall there, and it's only been 8 or 9 years, but it seems to have performed fairly well. And they do, the supplier does say that it is resistant to road salts. Now, we've been also reviewing this project with our engineering department, and I think as part of this project too, I think there's some drainage work and grading work on the new wall and new bike path to try and, as much as possible, direct drainage from the road away from the wall. So right now, the way the road is crowned and the water drains to the sides, well, the bike path's located on that, and so then the water drains across the bike path and down the face of this block retaining wall. And so I think what needs to be done is either some sort of ditch or swale to intercept that water and send it so that it's not coming down, cascading across, down the face of that retaining wall.
Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
My question's been answered, Your Worship.
Moving on to our next project, on page C66, is the Emerald Ash Borer. The Emerald Ash Borer program is a multi-year project, which is to address this invasive species, the Emerald Ash Borer, which is killing ash trees across Ontario. We're in, I think, the fourth, maybe fifth year since 2014 that this program's been in place. And it's been financed. This year, we are, similar to last year, requesting $300,000 to continue it. So what we do through this program is we remove infected ash trees. As well, we do inject existing ash trees to try and prolong their life. That injection treatment is not a cure. It's essentially a deterrent which will save it until such time that eventually we do remove the tree. And then we replant in a 1-to-1 ratio. So if we remove 100 trees this year, we replant 100 trees. But it's a 10 to 15-year project in order to remove all of the ash trees that we have on city parks and city-owned land.
Other municipalities have spent the same amount of money as we have. Is this pretty much in line with?
It is a very expensive and costly endeavor, but unfortunately there is, in our belief, no saving these ash trees. This insect will eventually get them all. It's just trying to preserve the ones that are significant, while the new plantings can grow and replace that canopy, so as opposed to trying to remove them all in one shot. So it's to try and spread that expenditure out over the course of the program.
Councillor McIntosh?
Any idea how many trees you've removed?
I don't have that number handy. I know the initial inventory was about 3,500, and we're in about year 4 or 5, so we've probably removed plus or minus 500 trees to date.
And private property they're on their own?
They are on their own, and so what we've been seeing as well is we were smart to have started it in 2014, because the signs of the bug weren't really showing up then, but now it is quite evident, and there are a number of locations across town, particularly on private property, where it hasn't been addressed, and you can see that these ash trees tend to be in clusters, and so there are some locations where you'll see a number of them and without any foliage at all, and it's just a matter of time before they die. Essentially, they're in the process of dying. The bug gets in the bark and prevents the tree from being able to send the nutrients up to the foliage, and so eventually you do see lots of new shoots at the bottom because the root structure is still healthy and trying to grow, but because it can't send that up, it's continually sends out new shoots, but eventually it dies. And with ash trees, they can be, once they're dead, they are not safe to leave standing.
Are we replacing ash trees with ash trees?
No, we're not. Okay. No,
the bug isn't going away.
No, we're replacing them with native species, though.
Okay.
Conseiller Bergeron?
I never thought to ask that question, but thank you for asking it. Are we replacing the trees where the trees are coming down, or is it just a one-for-one somewhere in the city?
As much as possible, but a lot of the trees, some of them aren't in ideal locations for replanting. So quite often, yeah, we do, as much as possible, try and put it in the same location, but if not, we do find alternative, better suited locations where the tree has a more chance of success.
I'm thinking of Water Street where they took down all those beautiful trees. That wasn't part of this? With private property?
Is that by the condos, I believe?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that wasn't part of this. This would have been, I believe that was part of an engineering project and sewer replacement.
So those won't be replaced?
Quite often, as the engineering department does do a replacement program, I believe those on Water Street, I don't believe they were going to replace them. I know particularly the condo, a lot of the condo owners, they prefer to not have the tall trees there blocking their view of the park. So I believe that's why they had elected not to replant those.
Thank you. Let's get that creepy bug off the screen. Next.
I just want to add that I believe at the March 25th council meeting, we're going to be bringing a lot of information about the tree canopy in Cornwall, this is a contributor to it. Of course, the loss of trees, but the planting of trees. And that report will speak to all kinds of things like our requirements for site plan control, for tree plantings, subdivisions, etc. So all of the contributors to the tree canopy in Cornwall. So that'll come to the March 25th meeting.
Our next project is on page C67. It's the bicycle path repairs. This is an annual project which we do. It's a resurfacing project for our bike paths. So it's about $50,000, and we team up or take advantage of our engineering department's asphalt resurfacing tender to try and get the best prices we can, since it's very similar in scope to their street resurfacing. This typically allows us to resurface approximately 1 to 1.5 kilometers of bike path. And we find that with that sort of level of funding, we're able to resurface our bike paths on about a 30 to 35 year turnaround, which allows us to maintain our almost about 40 kilometers worth of our bicycle paths and keep them in good condition.
Councillor Mark?
This isn't anything to do with paving, but you recall our friend Bill Bingley contacting us about the bridge, the couplings. Was that repaired? Was that a major job, or?
I believe so. That was, I believe, the bridge across in the Eco Park?
No, the one down near the Weave Shed.
By the Weave Shed?
Going up to St. Rose College?
The floating line?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That is part of the bike path network, and yes, I believe that those repairs were made.
Good.
Our next project on page C68 are the docks at the RCAF and Gaynell Park. We have two boat launches within the city, one in Lamru Park behind the RCAF wing, the other in Gaynell Park. The dock structures there are getting older. Last year we came to council. It was a multi-year project with the intention to do the one in Lamru Park last year and Gaynell Park in 2019. But due to exceedances in other areas of the budget, late in the season, we elected to cancel the project to use those funds to offset some of our overages. And so we are back here this year seeking funding again to do the one behind the RCAF. I'm going to say the last year, maybe it was the year before, where we were dealing with high water levels downstream of the dam. We had an issue with one of the docks at the RCAF, and we had thought that one of the pontoons had a puncture in it, and that's why it was listing or sinking, and so it had to be taken out of service. When the crane lifted it up, it was a problem as a result of the water levels, and we were able to put it back into service. So our concern is that, though, due to the age of the infrastructure, that one of these seasons, if if there is a puncture in one of their pontoons, we will have to take it out of service, and we will not be able to purchase a new one and have it in place for the remainder of that season.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
I don't know if I read it, or, forgive me, Worship, I'm going to ask to kind of throw something out there. If it seems kind of out there, then just pretend you didn't hear it. Have we ever considered charging a fee to use the launch?
So,
It's the best launch in the area, make no mistake about that.
Thank you.
so what we're introducing,
If I go to the hospital, I pay my $2 or $3 and carry on, right?
so, through you, Madam Mayor, what we're introducing is that we're going to be installing parking machines at both at the marina parking lot, as well as at this location in Glenmore Park. And so trailers will have to pay for parking. In other words, if you go down there and dock a boat, the parking of a trailer will require payment.
I thought I read that, but I'm talking about, like, when I put my boat in the water, I'm a one-time per season guy. I don't park there, I put it in, we drive away, and away we go. My point is, many of the other marinas or launches around, you're expected to pay some money just to use the launch. And I think that most, I don't know what I think I know, but considering it is like the best launch to me, at least, to charge someone $2 to say, look, this is a service we're providing, we live in a fee-for-service world, why wouldn't you expect someone to pony up a couple of dollars to be able to use that ramp? And maybe it's just not practical, Your Worship, or maybe it can't be. Have we looked at that as an option as well, or just simply the parking?
Yeah, so it was, what I've proposed there is a way of trying to do this without having to man it all the time.
Yeah, well, it's like one of those arm things, but that potentially...
Yeah, but then, of course, we've got the wing, which is right there, and so where do you put this arm? You know, because the wing has to be able to get into that same space.
Fair enough.
So we were thinking of this trailer parking. We think it will be reasonably successful. In other words, you see a trailer, well, that trailer has to pay for parking. It gets away from having to have somebody there all the time. The other thing is that sometimes where you'll see that activity is at a marina, and they're already manned, right? So it's not a very big...
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
But this is an unmanned and so...
Unstaffed, right?
Unstaffed, I should say, I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Yeah. Right.
Persons or...
And of course, we do see a lot of trailers at the complex whenever there are bass tournaments and that sort of thing. So again, we would require that payment be made there. And so...
Well, I realize that, but just as a point to consider, I don't know if it's practical or if any municipality... I've been down there to worship on a long weekend, and it's bumper to bumper.
Yeah.
And it's a service we provide, and in light of the fact that we're on for $80,000 to keep it up and running, I think that it's not unreasonable for a municipality to say $2 a pop, put it in the machine or whatever. So I don't know if it's something that can be done practically. I guess I'll leave it with you to give some thought to, or because I see it as not an unreasonable request of people.
Yeah, what we've realized too is that people who have these larger bass boats, et cetera, we're thinking of a $10 fee for this.
Right.
Which we think, and we think that they will think it's reasonable. One thing that could be considered, and we've given it a little bit of thought, we've not brought it to council yet, but that you could have a local season pass. If, for example, local people,
Fish every weekend, so you buy your pass and...
Yeah, so perhaps there's a season pass, which is, likely purchased by local people, and that way it's perhaps a little bit more affordable.
Right.
But for visitors who are coming with larger boats, I'd be surprised if they have concerns with a $10 fee.
So we'll leave it We'll leave it with you,
Right.
Mr. Bowe.
$20.
Councillor Bennett, and then Councillor Tondo.
I'm good. I was going to mention the past, so, thanks.
Councillor Tondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, just briefly on this, we discussed this last year, I believe, at budget time too. I think the question came up. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see the suggestion for the installation of the parking meters, because I think it's a reasonable balance. Because the main concern was, how do you collect the fee, and whether you have someone there collecting it like a student or something, but then you're paying a salary, solid booth, et cetera, so forth. Whereas in this case, it's an automated machine, and the simple solution is, well, you didn't pay for parking, now you get a $20 ticket.
Yeah.
So whether or not, it's not the equivalent of charging for launching your boat exactly, but it's almost like a tertiary way of collecting, it might be less than what we charge, but at the same time, if someone doesn't pay and then Lila goes down there, it's actually a higher cost. So I think it's a great way to generate revenue that's unstaffed. It's an old habit, I can't help it. Sorry.
We're all getting there.
Yeah, so, I think that's a good alternative, and, maybe down the road, we can look at something like that, a little bit more permanent, or figure something else that works better, but,
Any other questions on this? This was the last project. Councillor,
yeah, for sure.
are you just waving your hand?
No,
Councillor
I
Mack?
can only get your attention here.
Did you, Councillor Mack and then Councillor Cahalan? Eye contact is good, actually.
Yeah, okay. I'm surprised, I used to run up at Gaynell Park, I'm surprised at how it's really become popular. In those last couple of years, a lot of trailers left there, so, but there's no way you could set up a pay system up there, it'd be pretty tough.
We're thinking to try it out here and then potentially do it up there as well. But you're right, as Councillor Hollingsworth mentions as well, they are very well-used boat launches. And they're in rather good shape, the docks aside.
We don't have anything to do with the ones, the bay where the wing is? Those aren't ours, right?
Well, it's of course but we don't own, well, actually, I think we do own the land there. Not 100% sure, though. It could be in these surplus lands.
I recall the name being involved in installing those, and the idea was people would pull in there and walk up to the wing and have a lunch and a pop, but...
Well, I was going to make the comment that both Gaynell Park and this general area that is shown here, and that little bay that you're talking about at the wing, are subjects in the waterfront plan.
Okay.
So there are improvement elements in both these areas in the waterfront plan. So.
That's good. The one I know the one at Gaynell Park is not in good shape.
Well, the one in Gaynell Park in particular, the water level fluctuations we've seen in the news in the last few years has gotten more and more extreme. And so that boat launch isn't that old, in fact, and whenever they replaced it, probably 4 or 5 years ago, it was extended to be longer, and unfortunately now we're finding, because the water levels seem to be getting lower, there are times in August when, that concrete ramp isn't quite long enough. So there's not much more we can do there. We're hoping that they kind of come back to the normal water level fluctuations that seem to be there in the 10 years. One thing I'd like to mention too is you may see in the top photo there a crane that's being used to lift the docks in and out of the water. It's a very costly way to install and move these docks, but it's required just purely because of the size and weight of them. So what we propose is the new replacement docks would be of an aluminum construction, so lighter, with wheels underneath as well, so that they can be towed up the ramp by staff, as opposed to having to contract a crane to do it twice a year.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question about a capital project that is not yet in here and will be, I'm certain, I hope at least. A week or so ago, I sent an email to our CAO about something that I believe would fall under your department, Mr. Fothrop. I'm interested in seeing the feasibility and the cost of phasing in some recycling bins in our public spaces, so our downtown streets, our parks. So I'm wondering if we have a timeline on when that will be coming back, ideally this week, so we can look at it before the end of budget wrapping up. Madam CAO, do you want to comment on that?
I certainly can. Through that, I think through that initiative, I think how we have initially discussed potentially working through that would be to try and maybe phase in a strategy where we go out and we purchase certain types of bins or receptacles that would work in certain areas, whether it's our downtown area. Even I think we want to look at high-traffic areas like Lamoureux Park. Right. And I think that if council wanted to proceed that way, we do not have money identified or earmarked in the budget currently for it. But we could put some money aside, try and come up with some proposed suggestions for locations, certain types of receptacle bins, and then bring a report back to council later on with the introductory of that type of initiative. So I don't know that it's certainly not a complicated matter by any means. It's more so just the initiative, I think, to go out and purchase the right types of bins to put in place.
So are we looking at possibly doing this within the 2019 year?
If
budget year?
Certainly. So through Madam Mayor, if council would like us to do that, we probably would like council to provide some funding for that kind of initiative and then to pilot it. And then, based on the success of that, then I think we would probably look at, expanding it into other areas per, part of the communication that you gave to us, I think to kind of phase it over a period of time. Start it off in high traffic areas and then maybe expand it from there.
So if we're looking at starting the phase in this year, we'll need to add some dollars to the budget or take something from the reserve, which means we'd need a motion from us. And so I guess the direction I was looking for was about an amount that we'd be looking at for year one.
Right.
Is it $5,000? Is it $20,000? I don't know how much these receptacles cost. I don't know if we're interested in going with just an individual recycling bin next to a garbage bin, or are we looking at buying the combination blue and black box together? So I guess we can't really make a decision without some of that basic information provided to us. And I know we have that, is it the streetscape plan, where we have a really, I guess, we have a design, right? With all of our, if you look at our benches and our garbage bins, there's a design selected there, right? So are we going to stay within that design? And so what would that cost exactly?
Right. So through you, Madam Mayor, I think we'd want to certainly work a little bit with the BIAs to make sure that anything that we were going to implement would be complementary to the furniture and the waste receptacles that they have purchased and we've installed. I would not recommend that we fund it from reserves, because if it's something we're going to phase in over time, and also, depending on the amount, I don't think that it's a lot of money, but I think initially, I'm going to refer this back to Jamie and Mark, but I was thinking, something in the range of maybe $20,000 to $40,000, because some of the units might be fairly expensive depending, so I'm going to refer that back to the two gentlemen at the presentation table to see if they have some comments.
Yeah, so we have looked at, for example, the Civic Complex Aquatic Center, and our supervisor in that building has looked at and is working with environmental services to try and make sure that whatever it is that we order is compatible with, the requirements with environmental services. So we're looking at that building. So we're looking at a multitude of municipal buildings, but as the CEO has pointed out, I think we need to converse with the BIAs to, I've looked at other municipalities, and it ranges from, as you've described, something that's compatible with the existing, so you might have a blue container that is a lot like the black container that we have out there, so it's not too bad. Or you can get into these compartments, which I'm not really sure with the winters we get. Pitt Street if you go down Pitt Street right now, there's a lot of snow. And these compartments get a little bit complicated, so I'm going to rely on the advice of the Environmental Services Department, but from what I can see in some of these photos, it looks like a simpler program of, a recycling container next to, a traditional waste container. Might be a reasonable way of doing it, but that's all to be discussed.
Okay, thank you. So I want to make sure that we address this starting this year, because it looks like starting this year, we will likely, ideally implement mandatory recycling for our residents. And so if we are implementing mandatory recycling for our residential homes, we should absolutely be putting our money where our mouth is and investing in recycling on our public streets. At least a start, right? A show of support to start. So if we even just throw in 20 to 40 this year, I want to make sure that it begins this year and that we're not just saying, we'll defer it and we'll defer it, and once we have conversations, I want it to be in the budget. I want it to be a project as if it were, in the capital projects. So I guess, would you need a motion from me now? Yes, I would. Okay, then I would like to move a motion that we add another $40,000 to the capital budget from the tax base, I suppose, if it's not going to come from reserve, to begin addressing a phase-in for public recycling.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Towndale, debate? Councillor Gardner, you were on the list.
Oh, yeah?
You raised your...
I'm just scratching my nose.
Oh, were you? Okay.
But that's fine. We had a discussion about this yesterday, about not knowing how much the cost was going to be, or what, it's on a different level, it's a lower level, but what the cost is, what is it we're going to be buying, and we have no idea where we're going. We talked about that last night, so I have a little bit of a difficulty when we come in late with something and to approve it when I don't know how much the cost is going to be at the end of the day. So I'll wait to see what the rest of the council has to say.
Councillor Mack?
I couldn't agree more with what you said. We're just throwing a number out there, we don't know what we're getting. We're supposed to consulting with downtown people. If we find 40,000 to cut somewhere, I'll think about it, but we're starting to add, I'm getting nervous. I see some other things we'll be adding too. We're late in the game for...
Madam CEO.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I'm also going to look to Mr. Fotherp. So I believe when the BIAs invested funds to put the furniture in the downtown area, I believe that investment was probably close to the range of, I want to say it was about $40,000.
I believe it may have been more. I want to say maybe even 75 it was park benches and bike racks and garbage cans.
So I think that the intent would be, if there was money set aside in the budget, we'd be able to talk to the BIAs, be able to come up with a couple of different, maybe designs of these containers, come back to council. We could provide, pictures of what they would look like. I'm not saying that we'd go out and necessarily spend all of the $40,000, but I think ideally you'd want certain locations going down. The way we've interpreted the request from Councillor Hebert is to have certain containers located strategically along the downtown, Pitt Street corridor, and then also some containers in Lamoureux Park. So depending on how much money is put in the budget would dictate how many of these containers we would be able to put. So I don't know that it's a matter that, we want to be, I don't think we want to be crazy with the budget. I don't think we want to be irresponsible, but I think that when you think about public traffic areas like that, there's probably enough of these containers that we would need. Do we know how much the units are that are at the Civic Complex, as an example?
I don't know necessarily how much those were, but I think the ones that were located downtown that you see are probably in the $500-600 range.
Right.
And I do think too that a phasing is a reasonable idea, because the truth is we have a lot of garbage cans. So if you want to put a recycling container next to a traditional waste container, there are a lot.
Councillor Elaine McDonald. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say very quickly that given that we're changing our solid waste service in April, and I think we've asked the DVIA, or obliged them to buy a new kind of receptacle for garbage anyway, that they have to put at the sidewalk. I figure it's a good time to make a change, make it really broadly, but we have to do this really quickly so that, given that we've put an obligation on the DBIA to do something by April to accommodate our new service, we really have to move super fast, or do this maybe in Ramwood Park as a good pilot project, maybe on a small scale, but pilot project. Madam CEO, do you want to comment on DBIA having to buy receptacles? Yeah, well, I got some objection letters from people in DBIA. I thought they needed a new type of garbage can to put out at the curb. I don't think we finalized anything around that.
Right, so, Madam CEO. So, through you, Madam Mayor, that is part of a report that'll be coming to council on Monday evening with respect to our new bylaw for curbside collection and recycling.
Okay.
But if there's questions, I think that Mr. St. Marseille could help us with responding to some of those questions.
Frankly, I didn't hear everything that Councillor Ebert had said, so I'm working a little bit in the dark. I do want to support any initiative to increase our recycling and all that sort of thing. So, okay. Councillor Towndale?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second the motion because this is something that I've discussed as well. You know, we talk about our diversion rates in a residential context, which I think are 30%. And part of the discussion we had recently in regards to the waste, solid waste RFP was that they're low, and they are low, realistically. I think they're abysmal. But one of the things that I've noticed since being a councillor is that I don't think we, as the city, recycle effectively ourselves. I've brought this up before. There's no recycling receptacle in this room. There's one in the office that we all share, but at one time it was removed. You go to the Civic Complex or the Benson Center, there are a few here and there, but they're not universal. It's mostly garbages. So, you know, we're talking about landfill life and $50 to $60 million to potentially replace our landfill. You know, we talked about a report in this budget to look at alternatives for like organic processing and whatnot to reduce that impact. Yet, if we want people to recycle, we have to set the example. You have to lead by example. So we're not doing it. We don't provide the ability for people to do it, but then we're telling them, you better do this. And if we institute mandatory recycling, and we don't have receptacles for recycling, are we going to charge ourselves for not doing it? It's ridiculous. So we really need to look at this in a way. I think the way the motion is worded, it says $40,000 for public recycling. I interpret that as anywhere in the city that's publicly owned. I could buildings, Lambert Park, downtown. But the thing is, too, one thing I have noticed, and it's true, there are a lot of garbage receptacles downtown now, but they weren't always there. They've been staggered in, I've noticed, because they're coming further and further out from Pitt Street. And so we don't have to do this all at once, but it is something I think we do need to do. I think $40,000 is a reasonable amount. And, you know, the thing is, when we're recouping those recyclable materials, we sell those. So, now, I'm not saying it's going to pay for it, but we're spending money to save money and then generate money. I think that works for the city, and I think it's a good idea, and it's something we need to start doing now. I think we're behind the 8 ball on it. We should have been doing this a couple of years ago. I mean, the receptacles that the DBIA bought are very, very nice, but if we had partnered with them in the sense of trying to say, hey, you may want to buy a multi-bin container, then, you know, we wouldn't have this issue where we're having to buy separate containers that may not match or whatever it is. So, because eventually this is going to have to happen. This is something that has to happen. Provincial law is saying where we're going with diversion rates and everything, so we don't have a choice, but I am in favor of this, and I think we have to do this. Thank you.
Conseiller Bergeron?
Thank you. Just so I'm clear, we can't bring new spending motions to council until next budget? We're adding this to this budget, but could a councillor not bring this to council at any point during the year?
Madam CEO?
Through you, Madam Mayor. It could be brought forward, but the reality would be if we haven't budgeted for it, then council will need to determine how it will be funded. So then do you want to draw from reserves to pay for it? So my comment just in general this afternoon is that to do a purchase like that, I'm not sure that if there was hesitation on council's side whether or not the project would go forward, then I think I would recommend that you could consider reserves as a funding source without putting it on the tax base. But if we think it's something that we're going to proceed, and it's a matter of maybe what is the type of container, where exactly are the locations, or how many we're implementing, then I would recommend that really we should be properly funding that out of the gate and phasing it in. So if it's a dollar amount, it could be phased in over a period of years. I think we're just indicating that we think that in the range of $40,000, we'd be able to make a fairly significant initiative this year to reach out to certain public areas that would utilize such containers and have hopefully a positive effort for recycling.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Just a question, Your Worship, and I'm not sure who I'm directing it to, because I'm not sure. How are we going to pay for this? Are we going to take it out of reserve? Are we going to finance it? Are we taking it?
Madam CFO?
Does the motion specifically say?
It's a tax base.
The motion was to put it into the budget, to add it as a project.
Like another little 40,000, so we're not going to readjust it.
0.0001.
Madam CFO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, my understanding was that we would add it to the tax levy for 2019.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. I was
Okay,
talking.
yeah. Everybody listen to Ms. Bailey.
My understanding is that we'd add it to the 2019 tax levy, if it was approved.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
Any further comments? You want to wrap up?
Yeah,
Councillor
sure.
Bennett, did you want to comment? You look quizzical.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of it. Is there any way we could put this off till tomorrow and give somebody a chance to get some actual some pricing on some of these units and just a little bit more information?
I CC'd all of you in an email. I did ask about a week ago, so, and it seems like it'll take some time to get even more information.
Is that information on costs?
Pardon me?
There was no information on costs.
No, nothing yet, yeah.
Yeah.
Or should I ask Mr. Boileau? How quickly there's a potential response?
I mean, we could certainly get some information between our department and Environmental Services. I'm sure we can get some estimates of how much a basic unit is.
Can I have the motion to defer to tomorrow until we get some more?
Motion to defer is always in order, Councillor Bennett.
Okay, can I make that motion, please?
Is there a seconder? Councillor Elaine McDonald seconds. So now we're debating the motion to defer. Councillor Mack.
I have no problem with deferring. I want to say right now, you projected the tax increase 3.09?
2.96.
2.96? Fine, I'm not going to vote for any tax increase over 2.96, so if you can fit that in somehow, I'm okay, but I support the deferral. I'd like to know, what does 40,000 get you?
Councillor Hollingsworth.
As far as the motion to defer, Your Worship, it's not the dollar amount. I get that 40 grand is nickels and dimes in the grand scheme of things. But I think in terms of how we manage our affairs, I would like to see like how much is it actually per unit? Is this going to change the way we pick, like in terms of picking stuff up? Who's going to pick it up or how? Is it going to be easy? Or like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a report about how this works, and whether it was 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, whatever, I don't think it's unreasonable to want to at least have some kind of data in front of me so that I know exactly what I'm voting for. It's not that I'm against the environment, certainly. I just want to know exactly what I'm approving and how it shakes itself out. So I would definitely support a motion to defer.
Anyone else? Councillor Gardner.
Defer.
Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, being that we're sitting as council, so that the motion isn't crushed, because it looks like it's going that way, I will vote to defer it, time being, get more information.
Anybody else in the motion to defer? I'll ask the question to Mr. Boileau. I mean, we are trying to do this budget in a timely way. That does mean that getting reports is difficult within the time frame. So is it possible to get some basic information? I'm sure you can't give us something too involved by tomorrow.
Right. Well, I think one of the one of the most important elements, for example, is, you know, what I've got in mind, which is this blue container that matches what we have out there. But just to give you some very simple math, if the estimation is correct at $500 for a unit like this, I believe, you know, Jamie and I were just talking about, I think we pick up in the recreation department close to 400 units. So currently, and that's just our area, and then there's environmental services. But, you know, $40,000 for $500 per unit only gives you 80 units. And that's why I'm saying, I think we really need to have a phased-out plan. I think it's a good idea to have a plan, but it would be very expensive for us to put something in place if the unit is $500 for the entire municipality.
But would a $40,000 amount kickstart the phase-in program?
Yes. It would.
Okay.
So, just, could we ask our CFO to see if she can find that $40,000 somewhere else so that we don't touch the 2.96? Would that be a burden or easily done?
Maybe through the report that's coming back from the department through financial implications will describe what could be done or if something can be done.
Councillor Lee McDonald?
I feel that we'll really get off the rails if we start cutting from some area of the budget that we haven't even heard about yet. So I think that we'd be well served if we were to go through the budget draft as presented, make notes to ourselves of what we want to change or add, and then at the end, maybe make all the changes and additions, because in 10 pages time, we might come up with something that we really want to spend $100,000 on that isn't in the book yet. So rather than make changes now, I think we should hear the whole thing before we try to modify it.
Well, there's a motion to defer, so.
And I'm happily in favor of that.
Anybody else on the motion to defer? Councillor Rabat.
Can I make comments that are not specifically related to the motion to defer, not necessarily, just to respond to some of the comments that I've heard?
Does it relate to the motion to defer?
Of course, I'm supportive of the motion to defer. A week ago, I asked for a report, so whether we get it today or tomorrow, either way, from what it sounded like, we weren't going to get a report until somebody else decided to ask for it. So I guess then I'm happy to defer and wait till tomorrow.
Well, it's your original motion, right?
Yeah.
So this is, thank you for that motion. Okay. Motion to defer. All in favor? Carries. Next item.
Madam Mayor?
We're done?
That was our last case.
Ms. Bailey. Ms. Bailey? Oh, sorry, Ms. Bailey wants to speak.
Maybe before Recreation steps away, we can take it back to the seat replacement at the complex. The reserve for Recreation Services facilities, it would be in a positive balance for the first couple of years, but because of capital projects that we see, it will go into a negative balance and recover in 2026. So it looks like it could be as low as maybe about $150,000 at any given time, just for your information.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brawler. Mr. Fothrop? You're quite the engineer, Mr. Fothrop. I like when you start explaining, you really put on your engineering hat and you break it down.
I really appreciate Jamie mentioning that I have my tubs in my bathtub at the other side and the green at one end. I never thought of that.
Madam CAO, who's next?
I believe we're moving on to paramedic services.
Mr. Lister. Welcome.
Thank you. Just thank you for your attention. We'll start on page C82. So we have 5 capital projects.
Okay, folks, we're going to listen to Mr. Lister. Thank you.
So we have 5 capital projects that all relate to operation of the ambulance service, so it's fairly straightforward. So the first one is replacement of ambulances, which you've heard of this already. We requested from the last council that we have permission to purchase 3 ambulances this year. This is part of our fleet maintenance cycle, so every 54 months we replace an ambulance. There are around 350,000 kilometers. The cost of repair versus the reliability is factored into there, and this seems to be about the point of where they need to be replaced. So we're going forward with the 3 ambulance purchases. We did ask for permission because of the change in the tariffs. There are quite a lot of aluminum in an ambulance, and we'll see the issues going on across the borders. The suppliers of the ambulances basically said, if you purchase or give us permission to secure your chassis now, you'll save some money. So we went ahead and did that. So we're basically finishing the project. Ideally, they'll come in about March or April.
Councillor Towndale?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Chief, in regards to these ambulances, if I'm not mistaken, we generally purchase these from the same company consistently, right? Like, we go to Crestline?
That's correct.
Do we ever, I don't know how many manufacturers of ambulances there are, I assume there's not many, but do we ever put out any feelers or tenders or RFPs to see if there's anyone who can offer a better price or anything to that effect?
Do we ever do that? We haven't done it in a while. And just to elaborate on that point a little, so there's basically, there's two key points there. One is the Ministry of Health regulates the ambulances, so you can't just go out and buy a van. They're heavily regulated, so the manufacturers of these ambulances have to be certified that they can produce the product to the standard that's required. So there's really only 3 companies in Canada that can provide an ambulance, and this year they merged all 3 became one company. So it's almost pointless to even try at this point to go out to tender to find an alternative company.
That's funny. Thank you, Chief.
Councillor Bourgeois?
Just a quick question. $8,000 to $9,000 per ambulance seems to resell them afterwards seems really low. Can you maybe just explain how the value of those just plummets?
Depreciates like such. And I just want to say, it may seem low, and that's an increase. It's almost 2-fold increase over 5 years ago. We used to only be able to get about $2,500, even $2,000 was a good price for a used ambulance. So the manufacturers are buying back the retired ambulances from us at a higher price. They use them internationally. They might sell them to developing countries and so on. So we're getting a better price even though it's $8,000. They're not worth much on the market when we're done. The engines are pretty much done at the end of their lives. The boxes are in reasonable shape, the box. So you gotta look at an ambulance in 2 components. One is the powertrain and one is the box. The boxes aren't bad, but the rest of it is pretty much finished by the time we're done with them.
Okay, thank you.
So a lot of times they go for scrap.
Councillor Gardner?
Just, are they fully ready to go? I mean, all the equipment's inside, or do we have to buy that separately?
The price that you have this time, so this year, 2018 was the year that we introduced new equipment into the ambulance, which came in 2 pieces. So we have these things called power load, which is basically a forklift that comes out of the back of the ambulance and lifts the stretchers. Used to be staff power all the time. That did that work, and we were getting a lot of WSIB injuries. So now we can buy it all as 1 unit. So that's what you'll see this year is 1 price, 1 unit.
I'm more interested in the inner workings of it, like oxygen and whatever units that the paramedics use when they're on site. Oxygen, mask, all that stuff that's inside. Does that come with it, or do we have to buy that too?
No, so it doesn't come with it, but what happens when we retire an ambulance, we just move all that equipment from the old retiring ambulance into the new ambulance.
Where I was going with this is, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We used to be able to buy all the equipment for inside the ambulances through bulk buying. And I know years ago the province stopped doing that, and so there was only one supplier. Are we still that way, or can we bulk buy with other communities?
No, it's very difficult to bulk buy. We try and piggyback on big contracts, so it's much like the buses that you heard. There's a stock, and you can kind of say you want, this lighting pattern on it, or that type of thing, but that's pretty much it.
It was much less expensive when we did it that way. I don't know why the government changed that. Thank you.
Anyone else before I recognize Councillor Towndale for a second comment?
Sorry, thanks, Madam Mayor. You mentioned something that actually raised a question with me, Chief, that I didn't realize earlier. Because you're talking about the ambulances in terms of two components, which is the chassis, which contains the engine, the transmission, all that stuff, and then the box, which contains the other components. You mentioned that's generally in good shape at the end of life of the ambulances. Has there ever been what's the feasibility of keeping the box and buying a new chassis, or does that even affect the cost at all?
Actually, you're looking into the future a fair bit, and so they're called remounts, where you take the box off the back and put it on a new truck. It became very difficult to certify the removal of the box to put on the new chassis. Legislation has changed, making that much easier, so that could be something you're going to see probably by next year, or maybe the year after that.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Chief Lister.
So the next capital project is a thing called Tough Book. So every ambulance you see out there has one of these in it. So anything with the red, white, and blue on it has one of these in it. Basically, what a Tough Book is it's a computer. It runs all the documentation that the paramedics are required by standard to work on. Ours are getting old. It's getting more expensive to repair them than to replace them. So we're going to replace a bunch of them this year, so that and that's basically all it says. It's just we need new portable computers in the ambulances, and it's time to change them out.
I guess I could have answered my own question by going to the next page before when I asked about equipment that we were buying.
Understood.
Yep. So the next one is this is a picture of the defibrillator. This is the ones that the paramedics use. There's two types out there, so I'm just trying. The next thing that we'll talk about is the one that the public uses. So if we tried to put our whole fleet out with with paramedics in it, we'd be one defib short. So we run 9 shifts in the day and 6 at night. If we ever wanted to expand that, we couldn't do it. So the second part of this is we run this program called Community Paramedicine, where they go out into the community and they deal with the vulnerable populations that use emergency departments as their primary source of health care, and we try and keep them out of the emergency department, which helps us in that we don't carry them to the emergency department. So on average, we save about 800 hours of offload time in a hospital by not having those people using an emergency service in a non-emergency way. The addition of this defib will allow us to do more with that group. So when we started, we did flu and we did just health checks. Now they're asking us to do things like INR, which is people who have special heart condition. They take anticoagulants and we have to go check their blood. We do UTIs, urinary tract infection checks. So these are all low priority things that we have to do, but we need this machine to check, and we don't have enough of them. So we're saying for $29,000 we can put more on the road.
Conseiller Bergeron?
Merci. I'm just looking ahead at 2020, but it relates to this. There's a really big expenditure, almost 20-fold, it seems, for defibrillators next year. Can you talk to how this relates to that, or if there's a way to spread that out a little bit, or?
So in the capital project, we have 14 defibrillators out there right now, and with this capital project worksheets, we were asked to estimate how long a defib would live, and there's not a lot of data out there on how long they live. So we purchased them all at the same time, and they all retire at the same time. We're starting to realize that may not be the answer, so we'll have to talk to the finance department about how we change our 10-year plan on that.
So I suppose that's kind of the essence of my question is it better for us to buy more of these this year to get you out of that cycle, if that's what's coming?
So there's several options. The finance have been depreciating the defibs as they go along, so the book value of these defibs now is zero. So I guess the right financial answer is now it's time to replace them, which is a tricky question in that they go through regular maintenance all the time, and they just went through a regular maintenance cycle, and the feedback from the people who do this, it's biotech, it's not just us having a look at them. They're saying, if you just replace your front screens, the rest of the defib's in pretty good shape, which isn't a total replacement of the unit. So there will be some discussion on that before next year.
Thank you.
So the next one is a different type of defibrillator. This is the public access defibrillator. This is the type of defibrillator you see in this building. This is the one that the public gain access to. And this is purely a replacement of ones that are getting a little long in the tooth and they need to be replaced. So this is part of the chain of survival. The best chance you have if you have a sudden cardiac arrest is how quick a shock gets applied to your heart. That's why they're in all the public locations. They're all over Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry. And we just want to be confident that they will deliver a shot. These are getting old, so it's time to start replacing them. And that's what this request is about.
Councillor Mack?
Do we have one in City Hall?
Yes, you do.
Where is it?
Just outside the door.
Just outside.
Very close to council chambers.
All I know is that once everyone...
Very close.
At the curling club one time, we had to use one and nobody knew where it was.
It's kind of like the telephone, right? When you need a telephone that hangs on the wall, nobody can find it. So part of what we're proposing, which isn't part of capital, is like a greater education component of public CPR, first aid, and an awareness of, hey, when you walk into a building, have a look at where these things are.
Yeah.
Was there ever any coverage of these through some other agency? Did we not receive some assistance to cover the cost?
Yes, so the initial purchase of these was kind of I don't know if grant is the right word, but it was through the Heart and Stroke Society. They contributed a lot of upfront money to get this program up and running. And the deal there was we'll basically give you a bunch of money to get some defibs on the road, and after that, they're your responsibility. So
no more money from them?
That's pretty much it.
It's too bad. Okay, thanks. Next.
So the next one is a vehicle. So this is, you've got to remember that the ambulance service is a shared service. We service Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry. We have equipment all over the place. We have to service the equipment. And we used to do that with leftovers of vehicles that were at the end of their life, and we would drive them until they literally fell apart. We had a vehicle we had fall apart on us last year. The engine mounts were done. The mechanic said you can't drive that vehicle anymore. So we've kind of been piecemealing that along until we got to the budget period. So we looked at what we can do. We looked at paying mileage to an individual. We looked at leasing, and we looked at just buying outright based on the mileages we do. This is the cheapest option we have for that. So we're recommending that, the game plan is this would last for 10 years. So based on the mileage and our past history on how these things work, so we're looking at somewhere around $3,000 a year for which is way cheaper than the lease prices that we've seen. So that's what this is for. It's just purely keeping our equipment in the rural areas and everything else in top-notch shape. And it's also used to recover equipment at hospitals and so on when we stop and deliver patients.
Councillor Tondo and then Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, Chief, I am familiar with the vehicle you're referring to, because I know the guy who drives it, but anyways, what kind of vehicle are you looking to purchase?
They like vans. The people who work in them like the vans. They like front-wheel drives in the winter. It could be anything, but that's about the price right. They could be some communities use pickup trucks. Some use there's a whole variety of options out there, but the people who currently occupy those jobs and do them mostly really enjoy these. Also, we're really hypersensitive about lifting. So when they pick up things that are heavy, it's a low lift, it's a low floor, and so we like that kind of option.
Thank you, Chief. I do have a follow-up.
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, this might be more towards the CFO, but being that you're looking for vehicles out of departments, I'm hoping that combination of tenders, it won't be each department that issues one, because Public Works is looking for vehicles at the same time, like all these, like what? They're not industrial vehicles, they're more commercial vehicles that you can buy off the lot essentially, so I'm hoping that could result in some savings because multiple vehicles on the same purchase.
So you raised this yesterday as a potential question, so I'll turn to the CFO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it has been noted, so we'll take a look through our process.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner?
We have vehicles that we're paying for $31,000, and they're going out to the counties. Is the counties ponying up some of the cost for this, or is it strictly a Cornwall cost?
No, it would be shared with the counties.
It's shared, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Lister? Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor?
Yes. Sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Bailey.
We just missed one capital project. If we could go back to page C72. Mark can present from his...
That was my fault, because I took this to paramedic services and there was one we skipped.
Mr. Boileau?
I tried to slide it by. Perhaps I could do it from here. It is up on the screen. It's not going to win any awards for photos, but...
Not at all.
So it is about software upgrade, in the amount of $50,000. It is very important software for the department. It is used for more efficient delivery of permit issuance, and generally everything that we do, both in the building service and permits and as well as bylaw, and is now being used as well from the planning department and will likely be used by other departments as well, so it allows for coordination of different departments to be using the same information, which is often very helpful. For example, whether it be a bylaw infraction that perhaps the fire department should know about and vice versa. So it's a software requirement that allows for the department to run more efficiently.
Councillor Tondo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, through you, it mentions this is a web-based solution. I understand that'd probably be the interface, but being that this deals with things like permits and whatnot, will people be able to, I'll be honest, I'm not sure if you can do this now, but apply online through our website for permits and then eventually get them electronically as well? Like, for example, the province, when it comes to liquor licenses, you print it yourself now.
Right.
Most things you can apply for online, including a renewable gun license, you can do that all online, so like, is this?
Yeah, so I'm not sure whether this software would allow, and we are trying to move to more electronic submission, whether it be in that department or any other department. I don't know the full answer to your question, but certainly it's something we're trying to strive to have as public access electronically to all of the documents that you should be able to get to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Bolo? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kenville, bienvenue.
Merci, Madame Mayor, Council. Good afternoon, everyone. So the Glen Sterner Lodge capital projects start at C89. And so the first capital project that is before you is flooring. Flooring has been on capital dock for a few years now, and we've come to council to as a replacement program for our flooring throughout the lodge. The lodge is over 25 years old now, so most of the flooring in the home is original and it needs replacing. So we're asking for $100,000 to continue that program. Just for your information, in 2018, we did have monies in the capital. We have carried it forward to 2019 so that we could take both amount of monies and do our flooring on in our residence rooms.
Conseiller Bergeron?
Can you just explain the funding, because all of your projects have the same tax base in counties? We're not approving the county's portion, right? We're just approving our own, or because it's run through the city of Cornwall?
You are approving the amount. What happens is all operations, capital and operations are budgeted from a 70-30 split.
Okay, thank you.
The next project is resident equipment. All the three items in these projects are replacement programs. So the first one is floor lifts. As you can imagine, we are required to lift a lot of our residents that have lost their mobility. Many of our lifts, on an annual basis, we get them inspected and ongoingly they're on a maintenance program, and frequently we're told that the lifts are at the end of their lifespan and warranty becomes an issue. So we have a replacement program, and this will get us one lift for 2019 as part of that program. Ceiling lift is also a part of a ongoing program. We currently have 21 rooms that are equipped with tracks, and tracks are on the ceiling, and we have lifts that are on these tracks. And so we are asking for $15,000, which will give us some tracks to do 8 more rooms this year. And our hopes is to, at one point, have all the rooms to have that option to have a lift on the ceiling. The other one is electrical beds. We have a number of beds that are in the lodge that are original, and we are ongoingly replacing these beds. We have 38 electrical beds now, and the amount of $25,000 will get us 12 more. These electrical beds are equipped to the fact that they can go very, very low to the ground. They can get as low as 6 to 7 inches to the ground, which allows our staff to bring the bed lower, so that if someone does fall out of bed, they're falling from 7 inches and not 2 feet. Next is at page C91, and this is from a building requirement perspective. And these have 3 items under this project. One is asphalt repairs. And this year in 2018, we repaired the west side of the entrance. Half of that was repaired and re-asphalt. We're asking to finish the rest of the entrance up into the parking lot at the back of the lodge. Door handle replacement, door handles are original to the building. They are ongoingly having to be repaired. The mechanism from within are breaking, and so we want to start, this would be our first year of a 4-year replacement program where all the door handles will be replaced. And not only that, is that the keying system is important. The keying system would remain, and we would continue the keying system. And as we repair them, we would take the best of the ones that we repair and make sure that the others are maintained. And we would do approximately 85 of those per year.
Councillor Tondo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you. In regards to the asphalt repairs, we heard from Recreational Services, they were talking about the ones on the rec path and how they tie that in with municipal works and their work. Do you do something similar when it comes to that?
Yeah, we communicate, because it's not a long area, we would just coordinate that with them and saying when you are within a project or at the end of a project, come on in and do ours, and that's what happened in 2018.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. Sink and accessories are sinks and have been original to the building, and it is mostly the piping that is corroding. And so this again is a 4-year program where we would replace the sinks as well as the piping underneath, the plumbing I should say. And so we want to do 40 units per year. Excuse me. Next page on C92. We are ongoingly replacing and addressing our kitchen equipment. These two items, in 2018, we did start replacing our chairs within some dining rooms. 2019, we want to continue that replacement program. Now, these chairs are specific to, the materials are very specific. It's not a chair you can just go out and buy. They're very specifically made with the height of the seat, the arms, as well as the material on the seat. And we want to do our 3rd floor dining room this year. As well as we want to look at different tables. As you can imagine, our residents, the acuity levels of our residents continue to rise, giving us an opportunity here to look at different tables and table settings. This table here has, it can be set at different heights. All 4 people sitting at the table can be actually eating at different heights. And we are looking at smaller equipment. We have refrigerators, we have a meat cutter, we have a slicer that is getting at the end of their lifespan, and we want to replace some of the smaller equipment as well that are at the end of their lifespan.
Still one comment.
Councillor Gardner?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I like the fact, from a safety point of view, where the panels or the tops of the tables are even to the slats on the floor that will allow that stability to that table. That's a well-bought piece of material.
Okay. Our next project is in regards to, again, building requirements, but more specifically in air conditioning units and air supply units. And these are all, again, part of our asset management plan. We have 3 nursing units, and we want to replace. They're separate from the huge chilling system that we have at the lodge, and they're getting to the end of their lifespan, and we've had to put a lot of work into them just to keep them repaired. So we want to replace that in 2019. We have 4 air supply, big, huge air supply systems at the lodge. One in our tea room, which is our cafeteria at the lodge, is giving us a lot of trouble. We spend a lot of time trying to keep it repaired, and it's just getting to a point where we can't do that anymore. We want to replace that unit, and that's a very big unit. And if you've been to the lodge, all of our public areas, around the mahogany, around the public areas, there are blowers in there that blow the air conditioning as well as the heat. The motors are original, and they're seizing up, and they're at the end of their lifespan. So we've identified 28 units that are not working very well, and we are going to be replacing those this year if this is approved. The next project on C94 is our elevators. We have 3 elevators at the lodge. These 2 elevators here that you see in the picture is our visitors, our main elevators. We have another elevator that is our service elevator. Part of our asset management plan is to remodernize these elevators to keep them up to code and to keep them functional. It's a 2-year project. We will be doing that in 2020, but we wanted to put some monies in this year's in order to start that project going. And I've identified the 4 areas of modernization in this report. Door operators and OptiGuards and restrictors. Those are all items that will need to be modernized to keep us up to code. And our last is lighting within the lodge. And this is a 4-year project. Lighting at the lodge, as you may or may not know, is actually regulated. So there are areas where it has to have a minimum lighting, and there's some areas where it has to have minimum continuous lighting. So the same lighting has to continue across the whole area. The pictures will show that there's a lot of shadows at the lodge. And we want to get to a point where there's no shadows, there's a continuous lighting. This project, again, like I say, it's a 4-year project, and this would be year 1 that we would start this project.
Councillor Bergeron.
So I'm just going to summarize all these projects because they're coming from the tax base. Can you explain to me quickly why the part-time hours for the Glen Stewart Unlock are so high at $118,000? It's related to me in terms of all of this.
So you can imagine the lodge is a 24/7 operation, 365 days. So if you look at, I'm just going to use an example. So for every full-time employee, you need at least 1 part-time employee. So I can't work 7 days a week, right? So I work 5 days a week, and somebody works the other 2 days, right? And so there's equal there. So we have 87 full-time, I believe. So we have to have 87 part-time. The remainder of the part-time is to replace either for vacations, sick time, all those. So it's part-time is, a lot of it is replacement cost as well. Because somebody calls in today, I just can't tell a resident, well, you have to wait till tomorrow. It's you have to have a body there. So our part-time pool has to be much bigger.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I want to go back to Conseiller Bergeron's earlier question about the 70-30 split, Madam CEO.
Yep.
If we could just give a little update as to how that works and from a budget perspective, and when it is that the counties are advised, that type of thing.
So through you, Madam Mayor, we have multiple shared services budgets that we present to the counties. They were presented to the counties 2 weeks ago. With respect to the Glen Stewart Lodge, the Committee of Management, there are representatives from the counties that sit on that committee. We bill them for the operating components of the Glen Stewart Lodge. when it comes to capital, the counties only fund capital back to our municipality as those dollars are expended. So if we're working on a project takes a little bit longer, they know what the capital is that we're planning. So we will assume that they will typically budget for their portion of those projects and operations.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth?
Question on that line. So if I get this correctly, we say, okay, $100,000 for a capital project, 70-30 split, we put in our 70. Do they have to put in the 30, or could they say, no, thank you, we're not okay with that expenditure?
Well, I would hope that they wouldn't want to say no. I would hope that they would, if they had concerns about the budget, they would come back and maybe voice their concerns through the committee of management. So typically, the budget would go to the committee of management. You would have council representation from both municipalities that would receive that information. As well, when we present budgets to the counties, they know that quite often when we're presenting, our budgets are not quite passed as of yet, so they knew the status of this 2 weeks ago. So they receive our budgets. We have not had any feedback from them. It would be our expectation that they will fund the budgets as we have presented it to them.
And if I may elaborate as well, is that the lodge in the counties back in '94 when that was transferred, there was an agreement that was signed, and the agreement, and I don't have the exact wording, but I'll paraphrase, that it will be shared in regards to the amount of residents that are in the building. So from an operation perspective, we keep track of residents that come from the city and the residents that come from the counties. And we also have a very slight percentage that come from other places, and we use a formula, and it has maintained around the 70-30.
Councillor Dupel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Kenville, is overtime an issue right now at the lodge?
Overtime's an issue in our industry, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, through the last round of negotiations, did that change that sick leave that they have? Because for some of the new councillors, they wouldn't be aware of the sick leave provision that they have, right?
And I could, to Mr. Clark, but all the agreements are very similar in terms of their sick time. They've all been aligned.
Mr. Clark?
Thank you. So, yes, the new language took effect on January 1st as part of that agreement settlement, so the new provision is in effect and being active.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Any other questions? Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for my information, what is that provision? What is the number of sick days that each employee is entitled to?
12.
12?
So it is what we call personal days. We've moved away from calling them sick days, and they can use them in certain increments before short-term disability would take effect.
The follow-up, I think the current provincial government is going to change some of the wording about where they've been challenged, like if you want a doctor's note for sickness before, I think that legislation is changing under the Employment Standards Act.
It did change, yes.
So now you can request a doctor's certificate, right?
So for these days, the way we bargained it is they weren't. We let them use them in 2-day increments. So if you needed, for whatever reason you wanted to use these days, you had these 2 days that you can use where we did, yeah, in increments. So if you have 12, you can use them in 2-day. You can use them back to back. And if you want to use an extended period, it either needs supervisory approval for whatever the reason might be, maybe to extend a bereavement leave if you should so wish. Otherwise, you immediately go to the short-term disability program, and that procedure with the medical documentation takes over.
Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh?
Just, you say that you're going to 12 sick days?
For personal days.
personal days for members of CUPE who work at the lodge?
Yes.
They weren't they didn't go on strike though.
No, but we were bargaining with them, and they had the right to go to interest arbitration.
Okay, I remember that. What was it before?
Well, the way it was worded and the way it was interpreted by the union, they interpreted it as 80.
That's what I thought. I almost fell off my chair the first time I heard that. Okay. So there were 80?
Sick days.
You could take 80 days, 2 at a time, without a doctor's note. So it's quite possible you could not work Mondays and Fridays and Mondays?
Mr. Clark?
No. So they had the 80 days that were categorized as 5 sick days, and then there was 75 days at 75%. And the language that changed was this was not real clear or stipulated about a short-term disability program. So instead of having 5 sick days and a short-term disability program, the way it was being administered was I could take the 75 days individually, and which added 5 plus 75 equals the 80. We obviously, there was issues with that. It needed to be corrected through bargaining. We came to this agreement, which was much better, we thought, for everybody involved. And at that time, with the previous contract, there wasn't the 2-day increments that were allowed to be used. That we had no language containing it, and this is why we went to the different system.
This must make life a little easier for Norm.
We'll soon see. I mean, we're very early. I mean, this program started January 1st, so we're building.
I want to go back to the part, like somebody asked about ratings. Eric asked this thing about the part. Would that bring down the overtime?
We hope.
Yeah. Okay. You're early in the game. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good.
Mr. Clark?
The administration now is much simpler. Whereas opposed to going after the certain elements of whatever, instead of chasing down scratch pad doctor's notes, with this program, you go the 1 day, the 2 day, and then that discretionary interest of going to short-term disability requires a lengthy medical form. So we've built the system to, one, be protective of those that need it, but then again discourage more.
Yeah. Not to belabor this, but could you keep if you didn't use the 80 or 75, could you act this banked? No way.
No.
You got to use it up.
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Gardner?
We used to receive a report about lost time, people that were by department. We could figure out where it was being abused and where it wasn't being abused by some employees. I don't want to micromanage, but how do we handle that by department through you when specific employees are abusing their time or sick time? If it's sick time, I have a problem with that. They're just taking Fridays off, every Friday they're missing. How do you handle that? Because we used to get the information, we'd be able to read and say, we have a problem.
Mr. Clark?
Right, so the world around like illnesses and disabilities has dramatically changed, where it is not where there's a discipline involved. Like, obviously we have to try to work with people and recuperate and get them back in competition. So with this system here, they could take 12 Fridays off. On the 13th, they would not be paid, and we would then begin to look at what we would need to do to address those systems. So in our minds, the 80 was a number that we did not think is viable, and so we went to this number. And if people don't use these days, reimburse half of what they don't use. So we've incentivized people to better for us if you take no days, and we would pay you those 6. It works out. The math is better for us to enter into that kind of agreement based on what it is. So now we'll plot these personal days. Previously, through cooperation with finance, we had a fairly large sheet about costs and who used it that we used as part of this process. So this is a lot less burdensome, I guess, administratively burdensome to kind of track these processes. So again, to Mr. Kenville's point that we are
at the end of 2 months, watching this, we don't see anything jumping off, but we're also not looking for it either, just full disclosure on that. So we will have to wait and see as time goes by whether we see an issue or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kenville. Just to say, your industry is very difficult to manage from a human resource point of view. Levels of acuity keep shooting up. It's also a high injury category of work, so it's difficult. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please don't pour your water close to the mics, because it creates an immediate need for a bathroom break.
Glenn, he came in late, he wants to be seen at church. Says they got to be here by 2 minutes.
So,
Pizza is here.
so here's the thing. There's pizza.
Yeah.
It's 20 to 5.
There's pizza.
So we've completed the capital projects. The next thing would be there's two reports that have been added or that are included in your package that we would discuss. DBIA and second one?
Streetscape.
And the streetscape. So do we want to break before we talk about those?
I know, it's too early.
It's too early for pizza?
I just got here.
Yeah, I know. Councillor McIntyre.
That's what was on the sked.
Sure, Madam Seah.
I'll be, okay, is outside agencies coming up?
It could be, so Madam Seah.
Just I got to leave for 40 minutes later, but I don't want to miss that.
So if we go through, it's up to council.
I have to leave around 6:45, 6:20. I'll be gone for a half an hour at the most.
It's up to council's decision what items are dealt with in what order. I mean, we could deal with the reports, we could move to outside community groups. We could also look at the requests for services that are primarily focused around events, and those have been items that I think typically in the past we have budgeted for fairly straightforward.
But I'd like to put the outside agencies off to tomorrow because I want to discuss something with Todd Bennett. We had a brief discussion on outside agencies. I want to follow up on it.
Well, we might be able to do the in-kind services fairly easily. Is that what, could we do that one tonight? And
the in-kind?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we have a couple of reports to do, and then the in-kind services portion of the outside agencies. Do you want to break now, or?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, if we don't do the outside agencies and we get through the reports, what would be next after that? What would
It's really back to council to what you would like to discuss. So we've gone through, Mrs. Bailey did a presentation yesterday. We gave you a high-level overview of operating. We have gone through capital projects, a couple of reports outstanding. We'll go through outside agencies and community groups, and at that point, we would really direct it back to council for...
Could we discuss?
Councillor DePaul?
Could we discuss Councillor McIntosh's concerns before he leaves, or?
Outside agencies? I thought he wanted to discuss it tomorrow. Well, you wanted more consultation?
I'm going to be talking to Todd during the break, but I really want to be part of this because we have a couple of things we talked about, and we're here till 8:30?
Mm-hmm.
Could we put that on the schedule for 7 o'clock, 7:45?
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Well, I was just going to ask your worship, so that I understand. So we have these 2 supplemental reports that were added.
Yes.
We have outside agencies, right?
Yes.
And then really, we're at a point where we're going to decide whether we want to approve, or personally, if anybody has an amendment they want to, we're at a point where we're at the cutting stage, I guess, for lack of, or not cut, you know what I'm saying? My point is, your worship, we could conceivably get this budget done this evening.
No, because we're to approve.
Right. So we are back here tomorrow at 2:30.
We're back tomorrow either way.
Yeah.
Okay.
For one report? Or potentially the outside agencies, right? I think we will take a break, okay?
But it doesn't have to be from 2:30, it could be from 5 until, so
Right.
those are the working group. be able to make it.
Right. Councillor Elaine McDonald?
I know that administration has done probably months of work cutting this budget to get it to the point it is now. And I would appreciate it, before we come to a vote, that maybe Mrs. Adams just summarize how much has already been taken out of this book, so that we don't feel we have to sharpen our scissors at break to come back in here and do the job, really, because I do believe that the job has largely been done through very hard and long effort by administration over the last months. Am I right?
Amen.
And I don't think we should lose sight of that.
Right. So as we close into our final debate stage, you can raise that point again.
Okay.
Okay? So right now, we're going to take a half-hour break, so councillors can talk to each other. I think that that may be the case. Have some pizza, and then we'll think about how we want to proceed 5:15.